Okay, good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of our executive team and the entire New York City Police Department, thank you for being here and welcome to One Police Plaza. Today we'll be reviewing the crime data for the third quarter of 2023, as well as the year-to-date numbers. We'll also be updating you on the work our officers are doing every day to keep New Yorkers safe. As we look back on this past summer and the first 3 quarters of the year, New York City is seeing a significant, sustained reduction in violent crime. Driving the drop in major crime this past quarter was a 23.2% decline in murders, an 8.3% decline in robberies, and an 18.6% decline in burglaries. These reductions over the last quarter helped push overall crime down for the year as well, with declines in 5 of the 7 major categories. Furthermore, the number of both shooting incidents and victims continues to fall compared to last year, with 283 fewer shootings and 378 fewer shooting victims in 2023 versus 2022. And this success is not only limited to certain areas of our city either. During the third quarter of this year, shootings have fallen in every New York City borough. We are also continuing to take back our transit system, with index crime in the subways falling another 8.4% in the third quarter and 5% year-to-date. None of this happens by accident, and this is not a coincidence. These public safety gains are a direct result of relentless, intelligence-driven work by your NYPD officers. Since January 1st of this year, we have taken about 5,100 guns off of our streets and out of our communities. And the NYPD has seized more than 12,200 illegal firearms going back to the start of this Mayor's administration. Not a single one of those weapons will ever harm another innocent person in our city or anywhere else. This life-saving work continues every day in every New York City neighborhood, and is enhanced through close coordination with all of our federal, state, and local partners. We conduct long-term investigations with our district attorneys. We execute major case takedowns with the FBI, the DEA, Homeland Security, and others. Coordination and sharing information is vital to everything we do, and most importantly, we do it all together with the people we serve. But true public safety is not felt in a vacuum, and crime data does not always translate to personal experience. So we are always keeping listening and communicating directly with our residents and workers in every neighborhood, because it takes all of us to keep New York City safe. We understand what is at stake, and we know there is still more work to do. Working together, there is no challenge we cannot overcome. And we will never stop fighting to make New York City better tomorrow than it is today. Now we'll turn it over to our Chief of Crime Control Strategies, Chief Michael Perci, who will get some further details. Chief?
Thank you, Commissioner. So as the Commissioner stated, we saw 1,000 less crime victims for the third quarter. But more importantly, we saw violence decrease across the city. A lot of times we get the questions of, how are you doing this? I think it's important that I share with you the initiative that the New York City Police Department put in place starting May 4th of this year. Through extensive spatial and data analysis, looking at historical crew violence, narcotics historical violence, reaching out to our local commanders, historical knowledge of the violence in the city, which tends to spike in the summer months. We looked at quality of life calls. We looked at narcotics radio runs. And we also looked at over 100 zones across the city we thought would really, really help the communities across the city. So we had this initiative in place for 137 days. We established 69 zones across 40 precincts, which included our areas and our transit districts. Those 69 zones only encompassed 9 square miles, or 3% of the city. Unfortunately, those 9 square miles made up 29% of all the shooting incidents in 2022. We drilled down even further, and we looked at the times. So between the hours of 5:30 p.m. and 4 o'clock in the morning, we saw that it was 20% of the shootings. And that's the times that we deployed the men and women of the NYPD. We're not talking about hundreds, we're talking about thousands. Thousands of extra officers on foot in those 69 zones between the hours of 5:30 p.m. and 4 a.m. And what did we see? Between those hours, we saw a 33% decrease in shootings. We saw 100 less crime victims. We saw increased enforcement, precision enforcement. Over 7,500 criminal court summons issued, precision, to the quality of life calls that we receive time and time and time again. The dice games, the drinking in public, and the urinating. We saw an increase of over 2,000 oath summonses. We saw arrests increase over 3,000 in those zones. Again, who are we arresting? The people that continue to prey on innocent New Yorkers. Overall, since 2022, for those summer months across the whole city, we've seen over a 50% shooting reduction, both with the victims and the incidents. And we continue to drive down the violence in New York City. Confirmed shots fired, where nobody gets hit, but that's tomorrow's shooting. We saw a 43% decrease in confirmed shots fired in the summer zones between 5:30 and 4 o'clock in the morning. New York City police officers for the third quarter have made over 1,100 gun arrests, with over 1,000 guns recovered off of those gun arrests. Quick math, that's 11 a day. And you look at who we're arresting, the people who should not be out in New York City walking around with a firearm. So again, I just want to thank everybody on the dais, but especially the men and women out on foot during those long summer months between the hours of 5:30 p.m. and 4 o'clock in the morning, when most of New York is sleeping, but they're keeping New York safer. Thank you very much.
Now take a few questions on topic. Nicole Johnson, 611.
Good afternoon. Chief, you talked about some of the strategies, the hours, the zones, putting more officers on the streets. Could you just go into detail? You talked about precision, exactly what's being done to drive down those shooting numbers?
Sure. So again, we looked at everything, and through all the analytic tools that my office has, and it's many, using all the crime analysis, not just through my office, but throughout the city. And I will say, we have hired hundreds of more crime analysts throughout the city. We looked at historical knowledge. There's a lot of historical knowledge on this dais, especially during the summer months where we do see violence spike. We reached out to our precinct commanders. Are these the right areas that you think would prevent crime? We also overlaid street crime with our shootings. We saw a lot of our street robberies were also where we saw an increase or an area that we have a large number of shootings. We looked at the people who are committing these shootings. We looked at recidivists. We looked at where our crew members not only frequent, but where do they live? If we see a high concentration of crew members that might live in a specific housing development, that housing development was included in our zones. And we're not just talking about areas where we do see concentrated violence. These zones included Main Street in Flushing. These zones included Steinway Avenue in the 114. These zones Church Avenue, Fordham Road. So why do you say Church Avenue? Why do I say Church Avenue? Why do I say Fordham Road? Why do I say Pitkin Avenue in East New York and Brownsville? Because that's where we also see shoplifting. Retail theft, down 4,000 retail theft complaints this year, with an increase of almost 8,000 arrests. So we see a decrease in retail theft, but an increase in arrests. We're focused on the 425 individuals that have been arrested over 5,000 times for retail theft. That's 30% of all our arrests. We have approximately 18,000 retail theft arrests. That's who we're focused on. But we couldn't be focused on it without, again, clear analysis, data-driven, and also getting involved with our precinct commanders, and obviously at the macro level, from my office and every office here today.
Next, I'm going to Juliet Pop at 1010 Wins.
Good afternoon.
Sure, thank you. The 1,100 gun arrests, and you said over 1,000 guns, 11 a day. Who are you arresting? What are these recidivists? Are these mostly gang members? Who's carrying a gun?
So, you know, through extensive analysis, we've seen a little bit of a shift this year, and you know, we're always looking at, like you said, who we are arresting. I will say this, and this is a little broader than your question, but I will get back to your question. We see a sharp increase of individuals being arrested for a 7 major as their first arrest. About 32% of individuals arrested in New York City this year for a 7 major is their first arrest. That's the highest level in 14 years. So when I then drill down to who's getting arrested with a gun, yes, approximately 30% are identified as gang members. We have a sharp increase, as we had for the past 3 years, under 18 gun arrests. And as I look across the room and I see Chief Kemper, our Transit Bureau is arresting more individuals for low-level offenses that are carrying illegal firearms, and when we drill down on who those individuals are, they don't even belong in the transit system, let alone carrying a firearm, going into the transit system without paying a fare. Housing Bureau, same thing. Out there arresting individuals. Patrol Service Bureaus. It's a multi-bureau approach to take illegal firearms off the streets of New York City.
Tony DiStefano, New York Newsday.
For Chief LaPetri, you mentioned a certain number of civil summonses and also some criminal court complaints for what may be quality of life. Are you satisfied with what you're seeing in terms of the no bail or bail outcomes on some of that? Are any of them repeating?
So, Tony, I will say this. We have seen recidivism come down this year. This has been an extensive conversation with our partners in the District Attorney's Office since 2020. And the conversation has gotten better and better over the past couple of years. We talk about retail theft. I talk about those 426 individuals that have been arrested 30% of the time. 31% of those 425 are incarcerated today. That's a sharp increase from what I've seen last year. So those are the partnerships that we're looking to build, and we are continuing to build those partnerships, not along the 5 DAs and the Special Narcotics Prosecutor, but also our federal partners.
Hard New York Public Radio.
You said that 29% of all the shootings took place in that 3% or that 9 square mile geographic area. You said it was thousands of shootings. First, how many exactly was it in 2022? And second, you mentioned arrests increased 3,000 this year. Is that percent?
It's 60 in those 69 zones between the hours of 5:30 and 4 o'clock in the morning. We have a 61% increase in all arrests for an increase of about 3,000. As far as the 29%, I'm sorry,
What's the hard number?
I don't have that hard number, but I can get that to you. No problem. And that is during all the hours. Okay?
Team New York Post.
Hi, good afternoon. So, great job with shootings, first of all, nice job. And secondly, we see that assaults are up. So, I'm wondering why you think that is. Any theories as to why assaults are up?
Yes. Yes. So felony assaults are up. Felony assaults, our increase in felony assaults are driven by 2 categories. Assaults on police officers, and you know, when we drill down on that, Obviously, our enforcement is way up, and unfortunately, our assaults on our police officers are up. We also have an increase in domestic violence, felony assault. So those are the two categories that basically make up the third quarter increase, as it does for the year.
But even if you remove the domestics, you still have assaults increasing, especially over the last 5 years.
Yeah, so this year compared to last year, the two categories that have an increase is felony assaults and grand larceny of an auto. And the two categories of the felony assaults that are driving that increase is domestic felony assaults and assaults on police officers. When you look at the grand larceny of an auto category, what's driving those? Clearly, are three types of vehicles: the Hondas, the Kias, and the Fortes, and we know why. Those are what's driving our grand larceny auto. But I will say, if you look at grand larceny auto arrests for the NYPD, it's the highest it's been in 20 years. So we are arresting more individuals for grand larceny of auto that we haven't done in 20 years, and we will continue to focus on organized auto theft, and obviously vehicles that we feel are being used to commit another crime. And our data is showing more vehicles being recovered in New York City than ever in the past.
I have time for one more. Mark Morales from CNN.
Hey guys, how you doing? Just on two topics. One is on fentanyl. Do you have any data related to fentanyl arrests, fentanyl seizures, anything related to that as it compares to either this year or last year, anything like that? And I was hoping you could expand a little bit on the partnership with the courts. I know that at the previous press conferences we've been here, we've talked about how they've impacted what you guys are doing, but could you drill down a little bit deeper and talk about, has anything changed? Because with the numbers, they seem to be getting better. Has anything changed on that end?
So I'll take the second, and I'm sure Joe has some fentanyl arrests. I know he just briefed the commissioner yesterday on some really good seizures. So yes, Mark, I will just say this: the partnership between, and I've been doing this, and I've been involved with working with the district attorneys across the city for many, many years. Never before, since I've been working so closely with them, have we really shared a lot of data, right? And my thing to my office and the commissioner has really tasked me to share the data that we have with the DA's offices, and they are sharing their data with us. So they're saying, hey, we're looking at these 20 retail theft drivers of crime in a specific borough, and then we would come back and say, okay, well, we're looking at 50. So let's see if we can maybe look at the 50 instead of the 20, but let's work together. And that's just one example. And when we talk about working with the courts, obviously there's another agency we're talking about, and that's OCA, right? So we're always looking for data. And with the changes of the Court Record Information Management System, CRIMS, we are able to get more and more data, which I can then analyze through my office and kind of look at, is this somebody that did well off of a non-monetary release? Is this somebody that did well off of a program or whatever it is? So more data coming in is better data coming out, which means more precision, which means a safer New York City.
As far as the fentanyl seizures for this year, it's just with NYPD narcotics working with our federal partners in the DEA. Year to date, 210 kilograms of fentanyl have been seized. Compared to last year, it was 316 kilograms. Obviously, we're finding it in kilo press form, but we're also finding it in pill form, what the street dealers are calling fakes, meaning that we have drug users out there that think they're buying OxyContin when in fact they're buying straight fentanyl. So, we take it very seriously. We do long-term cases, but we're also making street seizures as well. Oh, absolutely. It's you're seeing a huge influx. Like I said, you have a prescription pill abuser that thinks they're buying a Percocet or thinks that they're buying OxyContin when in fact it's straight fentanyl.
All right, thank you, everybody. We're going to take a quick pause and we'll take it off topic.
It's Yeah, it's a system that we use using, linear. Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Thank you. You got it.
How my bosses on my back? All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to start with our topic. Before we begin, Chief Detectives, Chief Benny is going to update us on 2 cases. And we'll be taking some false topic questions on those cases.
Good afternoon, everybody. The first case that I'm going to speak about occurred in the confines of the 8-1 precinct. It's a homicide that happened in front of 57 Malcolm X Boulevard in the Bedford-Stuyvesant section of Brooklyn. On Monday, October 2nd, at approximately 3:53 in the morning, patrol officers assigned to the 8-1 precinct responded to a 911 job of a male stabbed at the corner of Malcolm X and Lafayette Avenue. Upon arrival, they observed a male, later identified as Ryan Carson, 31 years old, from 720 Marcy Avenue. He was laying on the sidewalk. He was unresponsive. He was found to be suffering from a stab wound to his chest. NYPD officers immediately began CPR and rendered first aid. EMS FDNY personnel arrived at the scene and took over life-saving procedures. The victim was removed by ambulance to King County Hospital, but he could not be saved. Ryan Carson was pronounced deceased at 4:18 in the morning. Members of the Detective Bureau quickly responded to the scene to begin their investigation. Through video and witness interviews, the detectives were able to piece together the following. At 3:47 in the morning, the victim and an identified female companion are seated at a bench in a bus stop on the corner of Malcolm X and Lafayette. An unidentified male wearing a Champion brand hoodie walks past the couple. There is no interaction at all between them. The male in the hoodie walks about approximately 40 feet from the couple. He suddenly stops. The couple stands up and begins to walk slowly toward the male in the same direction. The male in the hoodie suddenly stops and begins to kick and damage mopeds and scooters that were parked on the sidewalk. This male then turns his attention to Mr. Carson, stating, "What are you looking at?" Mr. Carson immediately places himself between the male and his female companion to protect her. Mr. Carson begins to immediately tries to de-escalate the situation. This male then produces a knife and swings it at Mr. Carson, who begins to back up. Mr. Carson eventually trips and falls to the ground. The unidentified male then stabs Mr. Carson 3 times, striking him once in the right chest. The knife pierces Mr. Carson's heart, causing his death. As Mr. Carson lay dying on the sidewalk, the male with the knife kicks him in the chest, threatens to stab the woman companion, and spits in her face. The perp then flees the scene. An unidentified female then arrives on the scene and begins to apologize to the couple, and she mutters the name Brian. We have received several leads in regards to this case and have developed a suspect. Detectives are working with our partners in the Kings County District Attorney's Office, and we are trying to establish probable cause to make this arrest. This investigation is ongoing, and if anyone has information, I urge them to please call Crime Stoppers at 1-800-577-TIPS. Our second incident is also a homicide. A male and female were shot in front of 631 Edgecombe Avenue on Friday, September 29th at approximately 6:31 p.m. The 33rd Precinct patrol officers responded to numerous 911 calls and a shot spotter activation at West 165th Street and Edgecombe Avenue. Patrol officers responded and located the first victim, Lavon Harvin, male, 42 years old, with a gunshot wound to his face. They also found a second victim, Jacqueline Bellini, with a gunshot wound to her head. Also on the scene was found a pit bull that had been shot and killed, lying on the sidewalk. Both victims were transported to Harlem Hospital. Jacqueline Bellini was pronounced deceased at 6:55 p.m. Mr. Lavon Harvin was pronounced deceased at 6:59 p.m. The dog was deceased at the scene. Members of the 3-3 Detective Squad and Manhattan North Homicide responded to the scene to begin their investigation. A canvass was conducted at the location, and 12 9mm shell casings were discovered in front of 631 Edgecombe Avenue. Witnesses were located and described the shooter as a male dressed in all black, carrying an umbrella. He fled westbound on 165th Street toward Amsterdam Avenue. Through numerous interviews, detectives were able to learn the following. Both victims were family friends. Mr. Harvin had been assisting Miss Bellini in walking her dogs because she was in fear of her neighbor. Mr. Bellini's neighbor had previously assaulted both her and her dogs in the past. This neighbor was previously arrested for assaulting Miss Bellini in April of this year. Through extensive video canvas, computer work, and interviews, this neighbor was identified as Lanu Moore, male, black, 31 years old, from 430 West 163rd Street in Manhattan. Working with our partners in the District Attorney's Office, Moore has been positively identified as the shooter in this case. The Regional Fugitive Task Force has been tasked with locating and apprehending this dangerous criminal. Moore has been arrested 6 times in the past. These arrests include the assault of Miss Bellini in April, where he broke her arm and assaulted another female in her apartment with a hammer. Lemieux Moore lived across the hall from Mrs. Bellini. Back in February of 2023, there was an incident where Moore was accused of stabbing our victim's dog over noise complaints. Since that incident, victim Bellini had received multiple threats from Moore. Lemieux Moore should be considered armed and dangerous. If seen, please call 911.
Take a couple off-topic questions. Miles Miller, let me see.
Chief, there is a significant situation here in terms of the 8-1 precinct with this suspect. You've identified him through someone calling out for Brian. I imagine you have identification on him. We have learned that this is a guy who works at a school. So, can you just tell us about why you're pushing off on identifying him, and also what kind of criminal history this person has?
Right now, we don't have probable cause. He's considered a person of interest. He's a suspect in the case. We would never, call somebody out as being a criminal until we have been established probable cause to make an arrest.
Demo, Zay, New York.
Same case, is there any indication that he had just had an argument with that female, and that's what caused him to be aggressive to begin with?
The person that did the stabbing was seen on the corner with a female acting very agitated prior to the stabbing incident.
Julia Papa.
Yeah, Chief, so what was the relationship, do you believe, oh, I'm sorry, what was the relationship, do you believe, between the woman and this person of interest that were in an argument?
I believe them to be boyfriend and girlfriend.
All right, we're going to go to Les Trent, Inside Edition.
Maybe one of you can answer this question, perhaps. Ryan Carson was a social justice activist, and there's a lot of criticism online about some of the criticisms that may have been voiced by either him or his girlfriend. I'm just wondering what you say to those people who are criticizing them because they were social justice activists.
I'm unaware of any of the criticism. I haven't seen any of that, so I wouldn't be able to comment on that.
But if there was some criticism directed towards the police department, how do you address something like that with people who are saying, someone said it was karma that this happened?
Karma that someone got murdered? I would say that's terrible to say that. Never say that. Karma. No, that wasn't. That was someone who got killed sitting on a bench with a woman. It looks like a random act, so that's the wrong statement to make.
Dean Emmett, New York One.
The chief for transit, can you talk a little bit about overall the feeling of transit, whether you're talking about numbers, but at the beginning of this administration, there was a lot of talk about perception versus reality. What's that feel in the subway now? I mean, people still afraid, but what do the numbers look like, and what's your message to people and any other chief or commissioner on the day? It's just overall that perception, in the city that New York City is still pretty crazy, even though you guys say the numbers are way down. Some people still feel that way, a year and a half into the administration.
So when, looking at the third quarter with subway crime, crime is down 8.4% for this quarter versus last quarter. That translates to about 48 less incidents, and more importantly, that translates to 48 less people victimized. The reduction for this quarter is mostly driven by robberies, where there's a 7% reduction in robberies. There's also a 15.7% reduction in grand larcenies this quarter. I'd also like to say this quarter there were 0 murders recorded in the subway system and 0 shooting incidents recorded in the subway system versus 2 each last year. Looking at year-to-date in the subway system, we're making progress. And we've been out front about this for a while. I mean, there were tremendous investments. We're coming on a year now. The Cops, Cameras, and Care program was released, and people ask, how are you accomplishing this? I mean, investments of, upwards of over 1,000 cops a day. At some points, there were 1,200 additional uniformed cops assigned to the subway system each day. That's on top of the Transit Bureau staff. Assigning them to trains, assigning them to platforms, assigning them to turnstiles. Year to date, and it's paying dividends. Year to date, we're down 5% in overall crime for the first 9 months. That translates to about 86 less felonies this year. And again, most notably, robbery is down 12.7% this year versus last year, and that translates to about 57 less robberies. And you need to say this. We consider this progress, and we recognize that we still have a lot of work to do. We're not naive. It's every day is a challenge. But between that investment and the men and women of the NYPD, our cops, I mean, you could have the greatest plans in the world, but without the cops, getting the job done. I just want to show get out some data with enforcement, the difference of this year versus prior years, and specifically this year versus last year with their commitment and what they're doing. Just this quarter alone, arrests are up over 66%. That includes a 22% increase in felony arrests and an 87% increase in misdemeanor arrests. Over 1,300 more arrests were made in the subway system just this quarter alone. And that includes increases in weapons possession arrests also. When looking at gun arrests, I think Chief LaPetri alluded to before. Just this quarter alone, we're up 100%, 18 versus 9 gun arrests in the subway system. Knife arrests or cutting instrument arrests, we're up 109% just this quarter alone. Fare evasion and quality of life offenses, I think, Dean, this goes to you with perception, and perception is real, and it's what they see when they come into the subway station, whether it's homeless, whether it's mental health issues, or people just acting disorderly. But when it comes to fare evasion and quality of life offenses, such as alcohol consumption, smoking inside a train, other violations, and these are the violations that weigh heavily on our riders' perception of order and safety. Summonses for those acts or those offenses have likewise increased just this quarter, 15,000 more summonses for those types of offenses just this quarter alone. That's a 49% increase versus last year. And that includes a 44% increase this quarter alone just in fare evasion summonses. So, look, in short, I said it before, engagement is up, ridership is up also. Last week the MTA released that I think they had 3 consecutive days in a row with over 4.1 million daily riders, which is the highest level, since the pandemic. But again, look at this as progress, good progress. We're never satisfied. We're encouraged. And we do recognize we still have a lot of work to do, but the men and women of the NYPD are definitely up for that challenge and are committed.
And Dean, Dean, let me jump on the perception question, because we get this often. In order, there's numbers and there's perception, right? The feeling of safety. We have to have more venues like this where we get our narrative out as to what we are doing. I just look at the summer we had in terms of, all the events, the weekend events, July 4th, Juve weekend. I mean, those are the safest weekends we've had. But events throughout the summer, crime, just violence is down. When you look throughout the city in terms of like Times Square, we drive through Times Square on a Saturday night, it's packed. Mike just said the subway's ridership is up. So we understand the perception. We have to keep getting the narrative out with your help, with our help, to make New Yorkers feel safe in everything we do. And quite frankly, when you compare us to, I'm not going to name other cities, but I think we're going in a different direction than a lot of other metropolitan cities. And that's how we control the perception. Constantly have the conversation, controlling a proper narrative, and then the numbers speak for themselves.
Time for one more. Robert Paris,
Chief Kenny, Chief, one on the Brooklyn murder and one on the double uptown. In Brooklyn, when Carson and his girlfriend are walking over to the suspect, is that because they're walking to get on the bus, or they're walking to talk to him, or maybe calm him down? What is the reason for that? Is that clear?
There's no interaction between them at all. They're sitting on the bench having a conversation. The male in the hoodie that eventually becomes the stabber walks past them. He gets about 40 feet. They decide to get up and walk. They were actually walking to the female's residence.
I see. Okay. And then for the murder uptown, what prompts the initial confrontation between Bellini and the suspect? Is it because the dogs are barking, or is it something?
Noise complaints based on the behavior of the dogs.
Noise. Okay. So he's a new resident there, or the dog is new?
They've lived there together for some time. He lives right across the street, right across the hall from her, and there's been numerous interactions, numerous complaints about the dog.
Paul Johnson, 611.
I guess last question. There's been some recent shootings in Brooklyn. Sources are telling us possible gang war. The other day, there was a teenager walking in the subway, and he was attacked by a group. And apparently the group asked the teen if he was a part of a gang. Are you concerned about gang activity? And can you update us on the case with the teen in the subway was stabbed?
So I'll just speak to that, and then I guess someone else could jump in. But you're talking about an incident that occurred yesterday afternoon about 4 p.m. I'm going to bring you to Brooklyn. I'm going to take you to the Atlantic Avenue station. We have our victim. Our victim is walking by himself. He's 16 years old. As he's walking through the mezzanine area, he's crossing paths with a group of approximately 8 individuals. As they are passing, somebody in that group of 8 individuals asks him or questions him if he was a member of a gang. They then proceed, this group of individuals begin to physically assault him, punching, kicking him. And he was, ultimately he was stabbed approximately, probably 3 times, once under his armpit and 2 times to his torso, and then they left him there, and that group ran off. Our victim was able to gain his composure. He walked upstairs to a different level in that station, where he ran into cops, and that's where he reported it. Fortunately, his injuries are not life-threatening. This incident I'm speaking about is captured on video, very good video. Requests for media flyers have been created and have been released, and detectives are currently investigating that case. So that's a little synopsis of what occurred and where